Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I am glad you could join me. Make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, check out the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. Share this episode with 3 to 4 people you know, especially people that want to think critically, people that want to be challenged. Because before I get into today's main topic, I want to remind everyone why I do this podcast in the first place. Just to make it clear, I'm not here to validate anyone's opinions. I'm not here to engage in the outrage porn that we see. If you want the echo chamber, you want the outrage, there are plenty of shows for that out there. I started the PAS Report podcast to go beyond the 4-minute segments and the talking points that we see in the media. I wanted to really explore issues, get people to think critically, dig into what's happening, explain it clearly to the people, but most importantly, talk about solutions. I also wanted to call out the abuses of power and demand accountability within the system, no matter who is doing it. Last week, I criticized Secretary Noem on social media, and this follows reports and court cases that were suggesting DHS is using administrative subpoenas to pressure tech companies for information tied to posts criticizing ICE. Now, I want to be crystal clear about this. If someone threatens ICE agents, or anyone else for that matter, arrest them, prosecute them. No problem with that. But if DHS is targeting people for criticism, that's a different story. I don't have to agree with what someone says to defend their right to say it. That is the First Amendment. That is a constitutional right. That is a God-given right. And what troubles me here is the method. DHS used administrative subpoenas, and this is a run around the judiciary. Now, some people accused me of pushing left-wing talking points, which I actually find hysterical. No, this is me pushing consistency, pushing a Constitution-first standard. The same standard I applied to the Biden administration, the same standard I apply to all administrations. So understand this. When I post something, it means I've looked into it. I don't do knee-jerk reactions, and I explore it. That's why I don't just fixate on perp walking, the usual suspects, and yes, corrupt officials like James Comey, John Brennan, James Clapper, they should all be prosecuted. But prosecutions alone are political red meat. What actually changes the trajectory is structural reform. Congress doing its job, they cut statutory authorities, tightening oversight, forcing these agencies back inside the Constitution instead of operating as the fourth branch of government outside the checks and balances. When it comes to a government that yields so much power that it can easily destroy people in their lives, we have to have responsible officials, and we have to question government. Even if we support the administration, even if we support policies coming out of the administration, it's important to always be skeptical of government, always ask questions, always push for more information. We need competent officials, and that is going to bring me to the crux of this week's episode. So last week, I talked about Secretary of State Marco Rubio's brilliant speech in Munich. I explained that it marked a turning point, I believe. It was the rejection of this end-of-history fantasy that sovereignty, borders, and Western civilization no longer exist or they don't need to exist. What Marco Rubio did was say all these things are important, particularly Western civilization, that Western civilization must survive. So it's like a tale of two cabinet officials. On one hand, you have Secretary Rubio, smart, competent, and serious. He lays out a clear doctrine and a coherent vision. And then on the other hand, you have Attorney General Pam Bondi, whose self-inflicted wounds, lack of discipline, have turned the DOJ into chaos, the Epstein Files into chaos, and she has delivered nothing meaningful in reforming one of the more corrupt institutions in Washington. And I know some of you out there are going to disagree with me, but I want you to know this isn't personal. It's an institutional problem. I want an attorney general that demonstrates seriousness and clarity. I want an attorney general that demonstrates she's taking the DOJ and building integrity into it once again. See, the DOJ is in need of a relentless pit bull who is fearless, focused on dismantling the corrupt machinery inside of it. And we have to put an end to this weaponization that we've seen. But Attorney General Bondi has proven she's not that person. For those that are longtime listeners of the show, you know that when Bondi was first nominated, I was critical of her pick. Now you know why. It wasn't because of party. It wasn't because of her personality, but because it's such a serious moment, and it required a bulldog that understood the depths of corruption that exists within the DOJ, a bulldog that was prepared to dismantle it. See, the Department of Justice has spent years targeting political opponents, years manipulating intelligence, stretching prosecutorial theories, eroding public trust, whether it's parents at school board meetings, whether it's traditional Catholics. The next Attorney General needed to be disciplined, needed to be quiet and methodical, but most importantly, relentless in rooting out all this corruption. Instead, what did we get? We got theatrics. That's what we got. And I'll start at the beginning. So some of you disagree with me. Let me make the case for you. We'll start at the beginning of a year ago, about a month after she was confirmed. Bondi did the media rounds, hyping up the Epstein documents, going on all the Fox News programs. She spoke about releasing the Epstein client list, that she had it. It was on a desk along with the Epstein binder. So she created this hype. She created the anticipation. She built it up as if we were going to see something explosive drop. And then she released it. And what was in it? Well, it was all information that had already been publicly released in the first place. And that tells me a lot. This was a self-inflicted wound that was totally avoidable. Every one of you should know that the Attorney General, the head of any department for that matter, they don't personally compile document releases. They don't compile the reports and all the documents. Their staff does that. The career officials, the deputies, the underlings. If that binder landed on her desk filled with already public material and she didn't know it, it suggests to me two things are going on. First, her staff does not respect her enough to execute properly. I mean, that's number one. Secondly, they set her up to fail, which is even worse, which I think is the case, because that would mean elements inside the DOJ wanted to embarrass the Attorney General of the United States. They did so without consequence. Did anyone get fired for this fiasco? Did heads really roll? What did two people maybe lose their job? Did she publicly demand accountability internally? Has she reformed anything after that failure? Think about the enormous damage they caused to her reputation. And do you think that the DOJ staffers had more respect for her or less respect for her following this debacle? So they set her up to fail. But another problem with it, and I don't know which one's worse, whether the underlings set her up to fail or whether Pam Bondi didn't even take the time to look through the files before she made the announcement and released the documents. Someone who is serious, someone who is curious, someone who is determined to get this right would have gone through those files with a fine-tooth comb before hyping them up nationally on Fox News. And if she had done that, she would have known it was recycled material. That, to me, tells me she's lazy. Do not underestimate how damaging this was, not just to her, but the entire Trump administration. You don't build credibility by overselling and underdelivering. You destroy it. And then we moved to September of last year. After the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Bondi was asked about hate speech. And here's her response. Take a listen.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
Did you listen carefully to what she said? She states that the DOJ is going to target those engaging in hate speech. That's what she said. Words matter. Now, defenders of hers will say, well, she meant threats. She meant violence. They're going to say, well, she walked it back a few days later. Yeah, she walked it back after there was pushback and criticism. Listen, I am consistent. Hate speech is free speech. You may not like it. I don't like it. But it is free speech. Free speech doesn't exist for speech we agree with. That's easy to do. Free speech exists for speech that we disagree with, speech that may be offensive, speech that may be hateful. The Department of Justice does not exist to police speech. They are not the guardians of what we can and cannot say. And offensive speech is protected speech. Hateful speech is protected speech. May be vile. Again, you may not like it, but it is protected. And the First Amendment does not exist to protect polite speech. It protects speech that makes us uncomfortable. We're not Britain. We're not France, where Macron says that free speech is a bunch of BS. We don't arrest people for offensive tweets. If the Attorney General believes she has the authority to target individuals for what she deems hateful, how is that any different from what we saw under the Biden administration? How is that any different than what we were criticizing for years under the Biden administration and under the Garland Department of Justice and the Mayorkas Department of Homeland Security, the Disinformation Governance Board, the Ministry of Truth they wanted to create? You can't have it both ways. You can't condemn the Biden administration for targeting speech and then remain silent when your own side drifts into the same territory. Consistency matters. The Constitution matters. Our liberties matter. But then you have the other issue, another issue, deeper issue. If Bondi casually suggests the DOJ can govern speech, that signals either a misunderstanding of constitutional limits or a comfort with stretching them. Neither is acceptable, especially given what we've seen over the last few decades, and I am talking about the weaponization of our government to target political opponents and ordinary Americans. We know the Russia collusion narrative was fueled by manipulated intelligence. We know the FISA courts were misled. We know conservative organizations were surveilled. Operation Arctic Frost targeted lawmakers and tons of conservative groups, parents speaking at school board meetings, pro-life protesters praying outside abortion clinics, prosecuted aggressively, infiltrating Catholic churches on the belief that traditional Catholics are these dangerous, potential domestic violent extremists. Now, in all those abuses I laid out that were done under the previous administration, what has been done at the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi to hold anyone accountable for those abuses? Has anyone been arrested for lying to the FISA court? Has anyone been prosecuted for manipulating intelligence besides Kevin Kleinsmith, who got a slap on the wrist and didn't even get his law license revoked? Has anyone been charged for weaponizing investigative tools against political opponents or ordinary Americans? Have we seen sweeping internal reforms to try and prevent this from happening in future administrations, regardless if they're Democrat or Republican? And the answer to all those questions is obviously no. In fact, we have seen nothing meaningful whatsoever. Now, a tale of two secretaries or a tale of two officials. So I brought up Marco Rubio, the competence, the smarts, the sophistication. Pam Bondi, let's look at Tulsi Gabbard when she became the Director of National Intelligence. Within 3 months, she declassified thousands of documents, minimal redactions. She exposed how intelligence was manipulated, how national security tools were used to target political opponents and ordinary Americans. She fired more than 100 intelligence officers from 15 agencies for using government platforms to engage in obscene and politically charged discussions on government chat boards. Some of these posts had pornography, sexually explicit conversations, celebration of conservative deaths. She reduced D&I staff by 40%, saving taxpayers $700 million a year. She returned the D&I to post-9/11 staffing levels so they can focus on the real threats that exist out there, not made-up ones that are created to target political opponents. So she refocused the agency on its core mission of intelligence, integration, and oversight. She imposed orders. She imposed discipline. She imposed consequences. That is what leadership looks like when you inherit a weaponized bureaucracy. So Tulsi Gabbard's the gold standard. Now ask yourself honestly, has Pam Bondi imposed discipline? Has she dismantled the entrenched bureaucratic networks that are fueled by ideology rather than agency mission? Has she exposed internal corruption? Has she declassified documents to show how our intelligence institutions and our legal systems were manipulated? Has she demonstrated that no one inside the DOJ is untouchable? Or has she managed to make headlines and media appearances? This is not whether you like Pam Bondi or not. It's not whether she's loyal to Trump or not. She's very loyal to him. I give her that. But she is doing him and his entire administration a disservice, and she has not met the moment. Her mission was simple: root out the corruption, stop weaponizing the system, and ensure that the most powerful law enforcement institution on this planet operates within the constitutional limits and with integrity. Now, what do we get? We still have the continuing Epstein Files fallout, her ridiculous testimony to Congress a week and a half ago. Take a listen to her response.
The Dow is over $50,000. I don't know why you're laughing. You're a great stock trader, as I hear, Raskin. The Dow is over 50,000 right now. The S&P at almost 7,000. And the NASDAQ smashing records. Americans' 401ks and retirement savings are booming. That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about making Americans safe. We should be talking about, what does a Dow have to do with anything? That's what they just asked. Are you kidding?
Mr. Jordan, am I?
So I will say unequivocally that Congressman Nadler and Congressman Raskin are clowns. They're both clowns. But they're still members of Congress, and you answer their questions. But that answer was completely ridiculous. The stock market is irrelevant. I don't care if the Dow hit over 50,000. She is not the Treasury Secretary. She's not the Secretary of Commerce. She is the Attorney General of the United States. And if you're asked whether anyone has been prosecuted with the Jeffrey Epstein saga, just give an answer. Say no and explain why no one's been prosecuted. I also find it extremely disturbing that the Attorney General was caught with a printed search history of the members of Congress who are investigating her. She isn't acting like a prosecutor. She's acting like a political operative. That is the definition of the weaponization that we were told she would end. And listen, I get the Democrats are going to attack her. I get it. I get it's all political theater. I understand that. And that's why I hate the public testimony, because when the cameras are on, members of Congress, they act like a-holes. But you're the Attorney General. You're not a political candidate. If she would have come out from the very beginning of the administration and simply stated that, hey, there is millions of documents in relation to Epstein, and we have a team going through them now, and we will release the files in a comprehensive report detailing everything that was done, what decisions were made, and why. But you have to be patient. The American people would have accepted that. Instead, she hyped it up, already released information, then said the Epstein's files were irrelevant, that they weren't important, and everyone should move on. Then she was forced by an act of Congress to release the files, so they decide to drop over 3 million files, no narratives or anything, not putting anything in context, just creating chaos. And I ask all of you out there, should Pam Bondi stay, or is it time for her to go? If she cannot impose structure on the Epstein rollout, if she cannot defend the First Amendment without equivocation, if she cannot dismantle the weaponization inside the DOJ, which is the most important thing, then the leadership has to change, and it has to change fast. Sorry, you may not like that answer, but that's the truth, because this brings me to the Epstein Files. Right now, there is so much information out there. It's difficult to know what's true and what's not. I warned 2 weeks ago that people are only going to see what they want to see, and that is playing out real time. So when we get back, in moments like these, we need clarity, not chaos. And I'll talk about it when we get back from a quick break, so everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, before I get into the details of this segment, I need to say something clearly and without qualification. I am seeing so many accusations out there. I am seeing people making statements of fact when they don't have any basis for that fact. And I want to remind everyone, we live in America. People are innocent until proven guilty. It's not a slogan. It's not a partisan talking point. That's not a suggestion. This is a foundational principle of our constitutional system. This has defined the country for more than 2 centuries. The burden of proof is always on the government. And it seems everyone out there, these internet sleuths, they want to render judgment of guilty or innocent. But an accusation is not a conviction. Being named is not being charged, and appearing in a document is not evidence of a crime. And if we abandon the principle of innocent until proven guilty because we're angry or disgusted or we're frustrated because we've seen so much get covered up over the decades, we are playing a role in undermining our republic. So I will say it as plainly as possible. Anyone named in the Epstein Files is innocent unless and until evidence proves otherwise in a court of law. That standard applies to Republicans, it applies to Democrats, it applies to billionaires, it applies to everyone. Now, with that being established, we can have a serious conversation, because defending due process does not mean ignoring what is troubling. Okay, it means separating criminal guilt from being a horrible human being. And I am allowed to judge people and say they're horrible human beings. And while I believe someone is innocent until proven guilty, it does not mean I am going to defend their character. You clearly see how horrible human beings can be, particularly human beings with power who believe they could do whatever the hell they want. The Epstein Files reveal proximity. It reveals access. They reveal how the elites believe they could do what they want, and maybe they can, right? Because there are so many troubling aspects to the files, and we haven't seen much in the way of actual accountability. The only person that seems to be taking the brunt of this is Prince Andrew. He's the only one that's been charged so far, and he wasn't charged with human trafficking. He was charged with giving state secrets to Epstein. We still don't know who, if anyone, was investigated. If people were investigated, what did the investigation consist of? How deep did it go? If there was evidence of a crime, why weren't they prosecuted? There were so many unanswered questions, and we don't know much more now than we did a couple weeks ago, even a year ago. Yeah, we got the files, but what good are the files if you don't have any context with it? And that's why going through these documents is so frustrating. These documents, listen, they reveal a social ecosystem of wealthy and powerful individuals that continued interacting with a man who had already been convicted in 2008 of serious sex offenses. I mean, for God's sakes, this guy had a register as a lifetime sex offender. That conviction was public knowledge. His status as the registered sex offender was well known. The plea deal that shielded him from broader prosecution was public knowledge at the time. So why am I bringing this up? Well, to me, it means anyone associating with him after 2008 cannot plausibly claim ignorance of who he was. No, I had no idea he was that horrible of a human being. No, you did know, and you still continued to associate with him. Now, associating with a sex offender is not the same as engaging in criminal activity. Again, criminal liability, you got to have evidence. You have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to have prosecutors and juries and trials. However, moral cowardice requires far less, and I'll just pose this question to you all out there. How many of you would knowingly engage in a relationship with a convicted sex offender? So what do we see in these files? Well, we see a lot of powerful people willing to overlook Epstein's sexual proclivities, his crimes. And it's clear that many wanted to engage with prostitutes. They wanted to go to these Epstein parties. And looking at some of the emails, it shows how truly depraved some of these powerful elites are. I mean, these are freaks out there. They wanted access, it's clear. They had no issues with the fact that he was a predator. They themselves may have been predators, but it's revealing. And it does say a lot about their character. It reminds me of like the whole Harvey Weinstein situation on steroids. For years, people in Hollywood whispered. They heard rumors. Many knew exactly what Harvey Weinstein was all about. They knew exactly what he was doing. They knew about the harassment, the sexual assaults, the rapes. And not only did Hollywood and political elites like Hillary Clinton continue to embrace him, they wanted to be seen with him. Then when the scandal exploded, they all claimed, oh, we have no idea. We had no idea he was this horrible monster. In reality, you knew exactly who he was. You knew exactly what he was doing, and you didn't care. You didn't care. The same pattern exists here. If you hang out with a convicted sex offender after his conviction, it tells me what I need to know. If you want to go to his parties after his sex conviction, I know who you are as a person. It's like my grandmother used to say, you are who you associate with. And we see a lot of these people, a lot of powerful people being implicated. We're seeing resignations. We're seeing firings. But we still don't know the extent of it. We still don't know what's true. We don't know what's not true. We don't know. And that's the most frustrating thing to me. I'll talk about that in a minute. I just want to address the Trump reporting, and I want to do it carefully because obviously he's the only one the Democrats actually care about in this whole thing. Don't forget, I mean, we've had 4 administrations here that could have looked into Epstein. So Reuters reported that a summary of a 2019 FBI interview with a former Palm Beach police chief, Michael Reiter was his name. He states that in 2006, Donald Trump called him and said, quote, "Thank goodness you're stopping him. Everyone has known he's been doing this," end quote. And the summary goes on to say that Trump referred to Ghislaine Maxwell as, quote, evil. Now, the reason I point this out is because it undercuts the left's narrative. And we have to ask, why aren't they interested at all in anyone else mentioned in the Epstein files except for Trump? And then when something like this comes out, You notice how we've heard Trump's name less and less. But there's a broader question that matters more than any other single question, more than any single name. If everyone knew what was going on, if all these powerful people knew, if the feds knew, if the DOJ knew, why did the system fail? Why did prosecutors grant this extremely favorable plea deal in 2008? Why did institutions continue to give them access? Why did people continue to give them money? Why did so many elites maintain their relationship? And why hasn't there been any real accountability? Those are the institutional questions. And I want to say something. People won't like it, but I'm going to say it anyway because when it comes to my mind, I got to say it. It is possible that some individuals named in these files committed no crimes whatsoever. They're going to suffer reputational damage because their name appears in proximity to Epstein, but they may have had incidental passing one time or something. They have no idea. That's the danger when you have a chaotic disclosure like this, a 3.5 million document dump. It's also possible that some people in these materials, they're moral degenerates, they're sexual deviants, they're predators. But remember, moral revulsion is not a legal standard or crime. You need evidence of an actual offense. At the same time, it is possible that serious misconduct occurred, and it is possible that it was never properly prosecuted. All those things can be true at the same time. This is why we have to have discipline. The American justice system is built on the presumption of innocence because the alternative is mob rule. And mob rule doesn't protect victims, doesn't deliver justice. If we allow anger and disgust to replace evidence, we become what we claim to oppose. It's like the 21st century Salem witch trials. And just because I'm defending due process, it does not mean I am defending pedophiles. It doesn't mean I'm defending anything anyone has done. What we are witnessing today is information overload, guilt by suspicion, and it's spreading indiscriminately. Right now, you have the public seeing bits and pieces, these small fragments. They're seeing emails without context, names without explanation, allegations without any type of clarity. In that vacuum, two extremes grow. You have one extreme that says they're all guilty. Kill them all. You have another extreme that says there's nothing to see here. It's all a bunch of nonsense. Move on. Those are lazy extremes. The truth is always more complicated than that. Nothing is black and white. And the one thing I think we could all agree on, no matter if you're on the left, right, center, is that the DOJ botched this. 4 administrations failed when it comes to the whole Epstein saga. I think it's also fair to say that we need to look into Epstein's ties with intel agencies. I'm talking about the Mossad, the Kremlin, the CIA, others. And I haven't seen a smoking gun yet, but it seems more than likely there's a connection. Mike Benz has laid it out pretty well. This is not about protecting the powerful. Understand, the powerful aren't paying my bills. I'm not here to defend them. When they're paying my bills, that's different. Okay? The reason I'm not tied to anyone, the reason I don't take my podcast to any other place is because I want my independence to say whatever the hell I want to say. If these individuals engage in criminal activity, we need to know. If there are ties to our taxpayer-funded intel agencies or any foreign intel agency for that matter, we need to know. At the same time, we have to protect the rule of law. We can't erode the presumption of innocence for people that we dislike. Once that happens, the republic changes in ways that's very hard to reverse, and Democrats already got the ball rolling on that one. The bottom line is, if this becomes mob justice, nobody's going to win. If this becomes partisan theater, which it looks like that's the case, nobody wins. If this becomes chaos without clarity, again, which that looks like the case, Epstein is the one that wins. And when we come back, I'm going to explain exactly what Congress should have done and why both branches of government are failing this test. So everyone hang tight, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, we need to talk about Congress because they are not totally innocent in this either. Everyone is pointing fingers at the DOJ. Congress is not covering itself in glory here. For months, members of Congress have been posting things like, I've seen the files. I know the names. Remove the redactions. There's a cover-up. Fine. If that's true, then do something about it. But here's what actually happened. You have Congressman Ro Khanna. He went public, named 6 individuals. He framed it as he was exposing wealthy and powerful men that the DOJ had hidden from the public. Well, it turns out the only problem with that was 4 out of those 6 had no connection to Epstein's criminal conduct. They just simply appeared in a lineup in the SDNY case in the District of New York. And that's it. They were props. That's not exposure. That's recklessness. And that's Congress for you. If you are going to publicly imply criminal proximity to a convicted sex offender, you better be absolutely certain you're right. Reputations are not props for political theater and political careers. So what happened after that? Well, after this little incident, after congressional pressure, public accusations, the DOJ unredacted additional names that were mentioned in the emails. And they released roughly 300 names found in the Epstein Files, and just names. No context, no explanation, no timeline, no indication of whether the person was a witness, a contact, an accuser, a victim, investigated, charged, cleared, nothing. Just names. And who's included amongst those names? Elvis Presley, Janis Joplin, Marilyn Monroe, Ro Khanna himself, Thomas Massey. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you it's all a big stunt. It tells you this process is unserious. Congress, they played it at cameras. The DOJ responds with a document dumps that confuse the hell out of everyone. The American public is left trying to piece these things together, and they can't understand the chaos. That's not transparency. That's dysfunction. And let's just step back and look at the law itself that forced the release of 3.5 million Epstein documents. The Epstein Files Transparency Act that required the Attorney General of the United States to release all unclassified records within 30 days. It prohibited withholding records based on embarrassment or political sensitivity. It even required listing government officials named in the materials. Now, that sounds tough. That sounds forceful. That sounds like transparency. But here's what it did not require. It did not require contextual explanations. It did not require any prosecutorial summaries. It did not require separating allegations from actual evidence. It did not require identifying who was investigated and who was not. It did not require explaining why certain individuals were not charged. It simply compelled disclosure without context. We should have transparency. But there's still a responsibility that we have to have. Transparency has to come with coherency. And this saga spans 5 administrations, like I said in the last segment: George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Donald Trump again. And where was Congress this whole time? We're talking nearly 2 decades. Where was the oversight? Why weren't hearings conducted years ago? And don't give me this BS that Epstein was being investigated by the DOJ and that's why Congress didn't do it. Congress has held plenty of hearings knowing that the DOJ was investigating something. They still called DOJ officials to testify about it. They still called FBI officials to testify about it. DOJ and FBI have testified plenty of times when things were still under investigation. Why didn't Congress subpoena DOJ officials years ago? Why didn't they subpoena agents that worked the case? How come? How come we don't see those subpoenas today? Instead, they wait years. And then they want to run social media campaigns to feign outrage, fight with the DOJ and expose publicly. This is a bipartisan institutional failure. It's not about Republicans. It's not about Democrats. It just shows how many unserious people we have in our government. And listen, I'm about solutions. I want to find out exactly what happened. I want to find out exactly who is involved, whether we're talking about human trafficking, sexual abuse of minors, cover-ups. I want to know about it all. And instead of passing a law that forces a 30-day document dump, Congress should have created an independent Epstein Accountability Commission, not made up of politicians, not media personalities. A small group, 15 commissioners, no current elected officials, no ties to elected officials, no DOJ officials tied to the case. There has to be very, very strict conflict of interest rules. Give them subpoena power. Require sworn testimony. Give them access to every DOJ and FBI file, including classified material. It doesn't matter. Give them the mandate. And the mandate is this: produce a chronological report of everything that happened from 1995 forward when it comes to Epstein. Detail every investigation that took place. Distinguish clearly between allegations against individuals, evidence of crimes, investigations as they happen, any charges that were either being considered, and any type of declinations to prosecute. Explain the prosecutorial decisions, that if they declined to prosecute, why did they decline to prosecute? Explain why certain individuals were not charged if evidence of a crime or crimes existed. Explain whether records were mishandled, whether it was suppressed or destroyed in a possible cover-up. Most importantly, Provide context. Was someone's name incidental? Was there a sustained relationship? Was there evidence of a crime, or was there nothing? And then set a date. Set a timeline. You have 24 to 36 months. That's the deadline. And when the report is complete, it automatically goes live. It's released to everyone at the same time. The final report doesn't need Department of Justice approval, no redactions. It doesn't require a congressional veto. Release it to everyone at the same time. The public, Congress, the White House, the media, everyone. That is what serious accountability looks like. That's what real transparency is. What we have right now is chaos, and it's not serving anyone well. Members of Congress tweeting accusations, DOJ dumping millions of pages, no narratives included, American public trying to parse through these things they have no idea about, but they saw it on social media, therefore it must be true. This is not how a serious country operates. And if nothing comes of this, which kind of seems more and more likely every single day because of the amount of confusion and hard to differentiate between what's real and what's not, then the system that protected Epstein actually remains intact. That's my biggest concern. It's that big government apparatus, that bureaucracy that operates as the fourth branch of government, independent from the legislative branch and the executive branch, doesn't fall within the confines of checks and balances, and believes that it is the guardian of information, that it will determine the flow of information. That's the real disgrace if we don't get anything out of this. Because this is bigger than Bondi. It's bigger than Ro Khanna. It is bigger than any individual politician or elite that's caught up in the Epstein affair. It's about whether we are a country that has any sense of decency left. It's about whether we're still capable of governing ourselves like adults. It's about whether a constitutional republic can confront corruption, whether it could confront abuses of power, and whether we could return to some semblance of equal justice under the law. That's what it's really about. There's a lot at stake here, and I just wish that we had adults in the room that understood what was at stake, that acted in the interests of the people, that acted not as politicians, but as statesmen and women, seeking truth, tempering expectations, calming situations down, exposing corruption and going after it so it doesn't happen again. Because that's what America needs right now. Now, if you found the content of this episode informative, please give the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Take 30 seconds to write a review. It helps other people learn about the P.A.S. report, and share it. Share it with your family and friends. The more people that listen, the better off we'll be as a country. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back on Wednesday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.